There was a Pokemon Presents earlier this week showcasing a bunch of new things coming to the Pokemon brand, including what's next out of Pokemon Scarlet and Pokemon Violet. Baldur's Gate 3. If you are someone who exists on the internet and are watching this video currently, you understand exactly why I'm talking about this right now. Baldur's Gate 3 is a game that has existed in playable form through early access since October of 2020. This game has been playable in some form for nearly 3 years. And suddenly, all it takes is one trailer with a guy getting freaky with a bear, and it does better than Apex Legends. Now, I am just a young and naive 26-year-old that had no idea Baldur's Gate was a name, let alone a name that garnered respect and praise. And as far as Larian Studios go, I am also very familiar with the acclaim that Divinity Original Sin 2 has earned. But does this look like somebody who has even considered playing that game? Yet here I am, writing, shooting, editing, producing an episode of this show about this game based off of Dungeons and Dragons with an isometric camera and turn-based combat because it is all I am seeing on X.com. And it has broken my understanding of AAA games. So today we're talking about early access and why the hell every single AAA game doesn't do this. Before we continue, a little disclaimer time for All Reliable. I am not a game dev or claim to know or understand the hurdles and difficulties of developing AAA games. I also understand that there are a variety of reasons why Baldur's Gate 3 is finding so much success right now. D&D podcasting is an entire industry these days. There aren't many in-the-weeds CRPGs anymore. People are looking for another horny fantasy game because Dragon Age is still MIA, but at the end of the day, Baldur's Gate 3 seems like it's shaping up to be an all-time great. In a year where The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild sequel, released, delivered, was arguably better than what came before it, and scored high with critics, this game just passed it. And every day on X.com, I'm seeing a serious conversation about this game being GOATY over Zelda. And that's just the justification for why we're here today. Baldur's Gate 3 takes a 2 scenario and turns it into a trend that early access games equals absurd success, as long as the game's good. AAA gaming is rapidly approaching a point where every other release has some kind of mark against it, whether it's crunch allegations, performance issues, overheating PlayStation 5s, or just being Redfall. In 2023, more often than not, if you're launching a AAA game, you're garnering a non-insignificant amount of side-eye from the gamers' TM. Now, folks on the production and reporting side of games seem to agree that this inflation of expectations and budgets results in a chase for bigger equals better that is unsustainable, as evidenced by the number of studios shuttering or being bought up every other week. Early access, by now, has proven itself to be a method to remedy this fiduciary need to race to the finish line and release a game before it's ready or as close to perfect as possible to just start making money on it already. With early access, you sell to your most hardcore fans, who get to play it well before they would have anyway, and will provide criticism and feedback for you to tweak the game to appeal to the fans who didn't want to buy in early, and if you're lucky, the internet at large. Baldur's Gate 3 has the talent and IP recognition to allow this strategy to be one that is practical. It also doesn't hurt that it began production as a Stadia exclusive, and I'm not saying every game should do this. I don't think it is financially viable for Darksiders 4 or the next Klonoa game to be made this way. But Halo, the KOTOR remake, a very specific type of Pokemon game, all of these will be years away from their announcements anyway. You're dealing with huge AAA games and megaton IP. If the D&D game can do it, what is stopping you? Let's take Baldur's Gate 3 out of the equation for a second and look at the other two notable early access to absurd success games from the last few years. Fortnite and Hades. Now, yes, both of these were backed by Epic Games in some capacity, owners of the Unreal Engine, and I'm assuming hundreds of Scrooge McDuck money-filled swimming pools. But again, if it's a borderline quadruple A project, why not try this approach when both Fortnite and Hades did early access and became Fortnite and Hades? We love both of these games. They're iconic, but there was a time not too long ago when they were brand new IP. Or in other words, risks. Fortnite was in early access beta for an extended period of time, and when me and everyone else were playing it nonstop for 300 hours and ran into crashes, bugs, and general rough edges, we forgave it because of that. Same goes for Hades, a game that is now one of my all-time favorites. The early access period allowed Supergiant to listen to fans of roguelikes to make something that was genuinely rewarding of our time, and was able to build up an expansive narrative experience over a genre that typically doesn't excel there, and I typically don't play. And much like Baldur's Gate 3 is shaping up to, Fortnite and Hades are certified all-timers in this industry, launching to nearly universal praise and success, where games like Halo Infinite and Pokemon Scarlet and Violet didn't quite do that in some form or another. I don't know if this aversion to early access at some of the larger publishers is out of fear of your game being viewed as lesser, incomplete, broken, and buggy, but I feel like that is massively undervaluing the comprehension of your audience, which, like, fair. I get why they'd be averse to doing it if that's the case, but I do think something like what EA has been doing on the marketing side with showing early versions of their games like the Dead Space remake from this year and the next Escape game are really strong attempts to break down this veil. Baldur's Gate 3 and its absurd success, I think, will get at least one big game in the AAA space to pursue this approach in the near future. Now, if that's something like The Witcher 4 to give CDPR a leg up and win back some fan respect after their botched Cyberpunk launch, or a game like the KOTOR remake, which seems to be struggling to get off the ground, either way, it's a good first notable step. Many will say you cannot plan for the kind of explosive viral success we're seeing BG3 have right now. Even Larian is bewildered at this, but I'll say you can. Look at the other early access games which also received explosive viral success with Fortnite and Hades. So long as you're able to take the time and care with your staff and work with your community under the mutual understanding of what early access entails and how difficult it seems to make a good video game, I think you have a shot. Now, that's very different from how games have historically been made, but if quadruple A gaming is the future, then maybe so is this. That's all for Low Poly this week. I'll see you next time. Another reason I think Baldur's Gate 3 is seeing massive success right now is their logo and key art. As you see, we have the mass appeal Marvel floating heads. I don't know any of these characters, but it gets the point across. Fantasy, Cthulhu. The logo also front and center, Baldur's Gate. That's the first impression you get reading this, not Baldur's Gate 3. At least, not immediately. They hide that 3. They very clearly took a page out of The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt's book in terms of hiding the fact that you are the third entry in a series. They're selling you on fantasy. No strings attached. Smart move, honestly, because I think BG3 will be 2023's TW3, so come award season, I would like to apologize in advance to this year's version of Bloodborne in Tears of the Kingdom.